I say it almost did me in. That is the thing that pulled me out of it, or it walked me through it and healed me, was that I have faith in God. I have a spiritual life that that gives me joy when joy is the least expected thing you would want to feel or you would expect to feel, and it gives me power to overcome situations. Now, none of this comes overnight. As I say, it took 4 years. But now, here's what I find to be an encouraging part of this story. So far, it's been pretty dramatic, I know, but hopefully this will give you some encouragement. In the support group, I met an actor and director named Michael. He immediately shared his experiences with me, and I with him. He was, in fact, the first person I told about my, if you like to call it, survivor's guilt. That's the way I see it anyway. I always had guilt feelings from why didn't I die? Why wasn't it me instead of them? All 16 of them. But Michael asked me to write a film script of my life. He said, "You've got a very interesting life, Steve. How about writing a film script of your life?" I said, "I wouldn't know where to make a start." So he and I started talking, sharing emails, tapes, and so on. And I found that I was digging into parts of me that I had never, emotions. All my life I had been more or less an actor, and that's what Michael and I started talking about. My acting came from my childhood, a sickness of asthma when I was a child. I had to pretend that everything was okay when I couldn't play sports with the kids. I was actually turned down from the Navy, the Canadian Navy, because I had asthma and I couldn't, the ships wouldn't be any good for my health, was the letter I received, and many things like that. But as I say, this is a very emotional tape for me, so if I'm blinking or shaking or nodding or whatever, you have to please excuse me because I'm trembling with emotion. And I feel good about that, though. I'm not hiding anything. So Michael said, see if you can write a film script of your life. So I sat down to write a film script of my life. And as I wrote, I was shocked to see the past reveal itself. At 16 years old, I had been kidnapped while hitchhiking on the highway by a man I believe, with all my heart, was a serial killer. That experience I was saved from by my acting. The acting I'd done all my life, I put it into full speed when this man picked me up, stuck a gun in my side, and drove me up into the hills. I immediately wiped out the abuse, which I don't want to get into in dramatic pictures or anything. I wiped out the abuse, and I chose to go to Southern California to escape from things that were surrounding me. I ended up in Southern California in Apple Valley, and then I went to Victorville, worked there for a while. And the one thing I really detested by the time I moved to Death Valley area was the racist attitudes of people. And mind, this was 1965, so these were racist attitudes that really, really bothered me and really troubled me. And because I wasn't a racist, I was looked at by people who were supposed to be my friends and workmates as an outcast. And I was called a lover and threatened with a beating, threatened to be buried in the desert, all kinds of things like that. But I actually got engaged to a Latino woman who couldn't speak a word of English. So there. Anyway, I don't want to stretch too far outside the beaten track here, but I had forgotten about this. I won't say I'd forgotten about it. That's not the word. The word is I lived in denial of what had happened to me when that psychopath picked me up on the highway when I was 16. 2 years later, I'm in Death Valley town, and I'm a hardcore alcoholic. I stumbled out onto the highway. I laid down on the highway. I wanted to end my life. That abuse from the kidnapper had stayed in me like a cancer. And I had to end it. I laid on the highway. And I've spoken about this in schools and college and many places. And I looked at the stars, Death Valley desert, the stars, millions of stars, and I tried to find a reason to live. I couldn't find any reason to live. I laid on my back, closed my eyes, and accepted that I'd finished with my life. A car came along and ran over me, left me battered and bleeding to die. To cut to the quick, I was found the next morning by two sailors from China Lake and a California Highway Patrol officer and ambulance drivers from Repressed Community Hospital, where they rushed me to. I was in terrible shape. My body was broken up, lacerations. I had to have a colostomy, and the pain was so excruciating that I had to have morphine injections. I was transferred to Kern County General Hospital, where I had more morphine injections, and eventually to back home, to which was Victoria, British Columbia, and the Royal Jubilee Hospital, where I had more morphine injections. I left the hospital. I was 19 years old when I left the hospital, and I was a hardcore morphine addict. I became a heroin addict. I was a heroin addict for 18 years. I was an alcoholic for 27. And I had a terrible cigarette habit. But all of this came because I chose to keep my life a secret. I was always ashamed. I was so ashamed. I was ashamed of what happened to me through the kidnapper. I was ashamed that I was in Death Valley being picked on because I wasn't a racist. I felt ashamed. I shouldn't have felt ashamed. There was nothing to be felt ashamed about. I felt ashamed that I was sick as a child. I felt ashamed that I was turned down by the Navy. But you know, the other day when I went to see a friend of mine who passed on, it was an open coffin. He had a U.S. American flag draped over his coffin. He was in the Marines, and he really he did have PTSD, and it just ate away at him, and it ended his life. I'm so lucky, more than luck. I'm so fortunate. I'm blessed that I had a friend like Michael who encouraged me to write a film script of my life. And as I did, I began to see these things revealing themselves that I had never looked at for 50 years. 50 years. And it was the healing that began to take place as I prayed, as I asked God to help me. And just as I'm healing, I had a massive heart attack. I'd been struggling with forgiveness. I could never forgive the man who had kidnapped me and destroyed my life. How could I? Well, I could because I had faith in God.
Okay, stop.